Yes, it covers both of these series together in one crossover that nobody expected to exist.
Wait, what? Let me get this pulled up, because this video's a banger. I haven't watched it, but I already know. L Supersonic Q, the best lost media from 2024 compilation. I'm excited to check this out. Are y'all locked in, chat? Are y'all ready? Do y'all have a snack? Got something? Let's get it.
In December 2023, a new article was added to the Lost Media Wiki that
Alright.
I and the majority of other people seem to not know about, but it relates to one of the most popular anime of all time,
One Piece lost media?
One Piece, and one of the most popular film franchises of all time, Star
Wars. Interesting.
Yes, it covers both of these series together in one crossover that nobody expected to exist.
Wait, what?
Back in 2015, during the Japanese premiere of Star Wars The Force Awakens, a special animation was played before the feature movie that depicted the characters of One Piece cosplaying as Star Wars characters and going to watch The Force Awakens in theaters for themselves.
See, it's random stuff like this, and there was one of them he talked about where it was Dora the Explorer, and George Lopez was green screened into her world, and he was lost at Nick Jr. and wanted to get back to Nick at Night. I remember that commercial vividly.
The only promotional image showcasing this crossover that's available online, we can see all of the main cast in their getup, including Luffy and Zoro as Jedi, Usopp as Darth Vader, and Nami as Leia.
Fire.
Now, you might be asking yourself why exactly this exists or where it was played. And the answer to those questions are pretty straightforward. With how popular The Force Awakens was expected to be, this One Piece animation was basically an ad used to promote an upcoming One Piece film called One Piece Gold that was coming out in 2016. Now, there are very few places online that even talk about this crossover, with a Japanese blog being one of the few good sources. It's all in Japanese, but when translated, reveals a few more details about the animation. It states that the special animation will be shown during the premiere of The Force Awakens at Toho and T-Joy cinemas across Japan, and would be history-making as a collaboration between these two series.
Technically illegal to record it.
Fans were apparently confused by the fact that the collab existed in the first place, and the blog has some quotes from Japanese internet users that read, "One Piece won't benefit from this. What was the person who planned it thinking?" As well as,
"How will they not benefit?
Who is the idiot that came up with this project?" Apparently the anger on Twitter was so large at the time, Luffy and Toho Cinemas were trending back when this was announced. It's kind of interesting that people got so angry at this collab, as the blog also mentions that—
Why are you saying collab? Collab.
That more specifically, this is the One Piece cast paying respects to Star Wars, and it wasn't supposed to feel invasive or anything like that. But to all of those people who really didn't like the fact that this existed, they got their wish, because it's been lost media ever since its original airing in theaters. As far as we know, it never got any kind of re-release or re-upload online, and considering so few people have even talked about it since then, I wouldn't be surprised if no one was even looking for it at all. Unfortunately, this was also a Japanese-only animation, so it didn't air outside of the country, and limits our search to Japan, which has historically proved difficult for lost media searches, and it's not really clear how anyone is supposed to begin looking for a copy in the first place.
You're right.
If the goal is to get an official rip of it, that's probably up to Toei to re-release. But if a cam rip is what we're after, maybe there's a chance one of those could resurface. It isn't uncommon for people to sneak cameras into movie theaters and film the screen.
You're right.
Which could have happened for this short, but considering how blatantly people disliked it, maybe it discouraged anyone from wanting to save it. Of course, no one knew back then that one day it would be lost, so maybe someone does have it and they don't even know that it isn't available. Like I mentioned before, we only have that one screenshot and it's been missing for almost a decade. So if anyone out there has a recording of this, it'll be quite desired by fans of One Piece. This next topic is a piece of lost media that I had no idea existed, and really had no reason to believe existed, but now that I'm aware that it's real, it's something I need to hear. In a way, it reminds me a lot of the uncensored Sailormouth recording session from SpongeBob. History surrounding this one is a little bit different, and comes from the place you'd least expect that kind of recording to have gone on, even less likely than Nickelodeon. that place being 4Kids.
What?
Now, anyone who watched the Fox Box or 4Kids TV growing up knows how strict they were when it came to censoring or editing content that they aired on the block. A lot of what they showed was anime, so needless to say, a lot of it had to be changed for the younger audience. The edits to One Piece are among the most infamous, but you gotta give them some credit for actually being able to make these changes at all and allowing such a non-kid friendly show to air in the first place. But as for the topic we're going to discuss and how it relates to 4Kids, for all the drastic edits that had to be made to their shows, it seems like that wasn't entirely the case behind the scenes, and there exists some rather mature 4Kids content that nobody from the public has ever heard, but allegedly is still in existence. This information comes to me from Blue Baron, who has very extensive knowledge when it comes to 4Kids. They explained to me that over the years, the cast from various 4Kids shows have gone on record and stated that there exists what are referred to as outtake tapes from their time recording at 4Kids.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the actual contents of these recordings isn't fully known, and for the most part they remain pretty mysterious. But in an interview from the Cartoon Gamer 8000, who spoke with Big the Cat's voice actor, Oliver Wyman, 4 years ago, we can get a little more information about how crazy the recordings really are.
There are outtakes. Oh my goodness! Someday you'll hear the outtakes from 4Kids, because those were a scream. People, wait. I'm sure people are holding on to them, making sure that they don't get leaked. And you get a little loopy doing this,
That gotta get leaked. That'd be funny. Fucking kids channel going crazy.
Crazy. That is a crazy one.
The only other piece of information we have about them is that Eric Stewart said that people would get cancelled if they were released.
Oh.
But as of now, it seems like they're doing a fantastic job of
They were saying some no-no-nos.
keeping them hidden, which raises the question about where copies even are at this point or how they could be released. The most recent piece of information regarding this is from earlier in the year, where Dan Green, who plays Yugi, claims that an old 4Kids voice engineer definitely still has the tapes, but will not release them for how naughty they are.
Bruh.
And in an earlier interview, Eric also alludes to having played one of these tapes himself, so he must still have a copy to some extent as well. But it's not clear how many former crew members have tapes or how much content is on those. I'm also interested to know how many of the 4Kids shows ended up with these outtakes. Eric has also joked that someday, when everyone retires, they'll finally be released. So maybe in the future, this is a piece of completely lost media that won't be that way forever. Also, while not directly related to 4Kids content, in an interview with Jason Griffith, who did the voices for Sonic and Shadow in Sonic X, he stated that while recording lines for the Shadow the Hedgehog game, he got to swear as Shadow and Sonic in a far worse manner than what ended up being used in the game.
What?
Somewhere on a DAT tape out there is me as Shadow saying a lot worse than what made it into the game. I even think I swore as Sonic, but it just didn't make it into the game.
This was because they weren't sure what the game was going to be rated, so they recorded a wide variety of different lines in case they needed something more mature. There's no word on if these recordings still exist, however. When I think about SpongeBob, I almost never associate him with video games, but that's not to say he hasn't had his fair share of them. There are actually a lot of different SpongeBob video games.
We gotta go through SpongeBob Lost Media. That will be a whole segment of this stream. Remind me after the next video.
If you look into it, dating all the way back to his earliest years. But of course, in the majority of these cases, there's no lost media to be found, aside from beta content that was cut or changed. However, if you jump forward in the timeline of SpongeBob games to the early 2010s, there is ironically an entirely lost SpongeBob game that you might have heard about, and now has a dedicated search that's been going for quite a while.
It looks so familiar.
This topic is called SpongeBob Town,
was that on
an
the website?
MMO game with big plans that were completely cancelled without warning after having been in development for years.
Was that on their website?
The earliest incarnation of the game dates back to June 2010, when South Korean developer Blue Arc Global and Nickelodeon Asia announced a collaboration and stated that the game would have been released all across the world. The plot of the game follows Mr. Krabs opening a construction business to rebuild the town after a devastating explosion.
That's a good idea.
Which is where the player's interactiveness comes in. As seen in one of the trailers for the game, you can create your own SpongeBob character, create your own farm, play games, and notably customize a race car to have competitions with other players.
That looks so fun.
Now, even though this game is considered lost media, there are still a whole bunch of screenshots, trailers, gameplay, and other visual assets that were released from the game. So you might be asking yourself what went wrong and caused the game itself to go missing. It's been stated that the game was in development from 2011 to 2012,
Okay.
with plans to release it in 2013. In October 2012, a technical test was conducted allowing for players to experience the game, which was reportedly very complete from those who played it, and is where the majority of the visuals we have come from. But for some reason, after this test was conducted, the game suddenly vanished and completely shut down, with no word from any of the companies involved as to why. There were even plans to have a second test run, which of course never happened, so the game has not been played since October 2012, during that first test period.
Damn.
It was in this closure that all of the game became lost and its assets inaccessible.
That's
So the
fucked.
majority of this mystery is the process of recovering a build of the game itself, or as much of it as possible. But since so long has passed since its creation, it only makes finding those assets more difficult. On top of the fact that people who worked on the game are now at different companies, and are all across the internet, so there's no central area to reach the majority of them. However, there is a dedicated search effort for this topic, led by Sponges5,
That's
in a
clean.
Discord server that was made back in 2019. There are a lot of cool and interesting
Did he say the original Fortnite?
aspects of this game that would be fun to preserve and look back at, but only when or if a playable version is found.
That looks fun.
Let's continue the video with a long ongoing mystery that I don't think has ever completely been solved, and is still brought up every now and then within modern times. In fact, it was because of a post in the thread on the Lost Media Wiki forums that made me think about this again, after having forgotten about it for years. If you follow the history of Sonic 06, you're probably familiar with all the beta and scrapped content from the game that have left fans wondering what could have been. And there's another game that fans closely associate with Sonic 06, but has never fully been confirmed on what it was even supposed to be. In the late 2000s, if you had visited the resume of Pete Capella, voice actor for the character Silver during this era, you would have found a listing for a game on his resume titled Sonic the Hedgehog Awakening.
Interesting.
However, what's strange about this game is the fact that it doesn't exist. Nobody has ever seen it, and the only mention of it on the entire internet comes from this resume.
Bro, it's so crazy how much stuff has been made that we just don't even know.
So you might be asking yourself, why exactly would someone have a credit on their resume for a game that doesn't exist? This has led to a lot of speculation about what the game actually was or what it was supposed to be. One of the more popular theories states that the game was specifically going to center on the character of Silver, and it's for that reason why only Pete has the game listed on his resume, and no other Sonic voice actors do. However, that would also imply that the game got far enough in development for voice lines to even be recorded, and that seems like a stretch since nothing else from it has ever been announced or seen. Another common theory states that the game was somehow related to Sonic 06 itself, or expanded upon its story, hence why the title appears after Sonic 06 on the resume, and it's believed to have been cancelled as a result of Sonic 06's poor sales.
Oof.
This does make sense on the surface, but it doesn't answer the question of why no other voice actor had mentioned it, or
That
why
is a good
Pete felt the
question.
need to mention it if it didn't even get off the ground. And one of the final theories speculates that it was just the working title for a completely different Sonic game, but this one is the least accepted out of the three, as there's no evidence to suggest what game that would have been, and Pete's resume already lists every other known title that Silver was in for those years. When following this theory, it seems like everyone sorta has their own interpretation of which game Awakening could have been the working title for, without any clear evidence to prove which one it could have been. In Sewer Reviewer's video discussing the topic, he mentions having talked to a user named Sonic King 9, who speculated that Awakening was an early code name for Sonic Unleashed, which was apparently in development as far back as 2006. It's possible Pete was originally brought on early for characters in that game before switching to 06. It's just not really clear at this point. Now, as for getting to the bottom of this mystery, or getting some kind of comment about it from Pete, I remember looking into this topic 7 or 8 years ago, and coming across a game journalist who had publicly sent Pete a tweet asking if he would do an interview. Perhaps specifically mentioning getting to the bottom of Awakening, but I can't remember exactly the details. But back then I couldn't even find the interview, and nowadays I can't even find the tweet again. If you ask me, I don't think the interview ever happened.
Nope.
I also remember messaging Pete himself on Facebook back then, but never got a response. So in the recent Lost Media Wiki forums thread, we talked about messaging him again on X, but as far as I know, no one has actually done that yet. And even though this is extremely unlikely, I know there's a practice in the industry where people will put made up things on their resume to make it look bigger than it actually is, so maybe this is some elaborate troll that he knew Sonic fans would latch onto years in the future.
Imagine this whole thing was just him adding that, and it's nothing more.
I'm not saying that's definitely what happened here, but it's a very bizarre set of circumstances for a game like this to have no presence but got far enough for voice lines, that Pete has also never publicly clarified in all the years it's been discussed as a mystery. But regardless, I would love to get to the bottom of this mystery and get these completely lost pieces of media found. The next topic of the video is one that I feel like perfectly kicks off Nickelodeon Lost Media for the fact that it originates from some of their earliest years of being formed into a network.
These are the ones I love, the early days when, just starting out, you really get to see how they started off.
The topic itself is actually kind of scary and mysterious. There's not a lot of information even being available about it, and I'm kind of surprised this wasn't discussed all those years ago, though maybe it wasn't known about back then. This topic is called Video Dream Theater, and just like its name illustrates, it dates back to some of the earliest years of Nickelodeon in 1979. This is a period of time where Nickelodeon didn't have original programming and would often get content from other places and repackage it for television. Nickel Flicks and Pinwheel are among the two most well-known examples, the latter of which is where the infamous Clockman short originally aired on the channel. However,
creepy.
in an effort to create some original content for Nickelodeon,
The Muppets
and in
before
their
the
first
Muppets.
attempt, Geraldine Laybourne was hired to create 2 original pilots that would be aired under the Video Dream Theater header. According to an interview with Geraldine in an article written for cablecenter.org, she goes on to describe the concept of this show and some of its content by stating, "Video Dream Theater was a send-in dream program that we did for Nickelodeon. One was with Julie Taymor, where we used her masks in one of the dreams of our kids, and another one was using color Xerox animation." Based on this recollection, there were a total of 2 animations produced for this series, with the intention of making more, by way of kids sending in their own dreams as a concept.
Interesting.
So it sounds like there was a little interaction with the viewers too,
That sounds
which is
cool.
a really cool idea. But as the story goes, Nickelodeon did not end up airing these pieces of animation back in the day, or launching Video Dream Theater at all, because of the difficulty producing each short and the overall low expectations for the series. Geraldine goes on to say that sometimes kids' dreams are really scary and dark,
Yup.
with themes about abandonment and other intense issues that don't make good stories. And this in turn would be hard to market towards that audience. Not to mention from some of their studies at the time, it was too hard for kids to make the jump from watching something goofy like Scooby-Doo to a surrealist concept like this.
Yeah,
And the
that's
Lost
fair.
Media Wiki article even states that the short's response was negative during some test screenings. Nick had to reevaluate their idea, and the whole project ended up being scrapped. Neither pilot ever aired on TV, and there is so little information
wanna
about
see
it
those
that the
pilots.
recollections from Geraldine are some of the only remaining online. It's not even known if the pilots still exist, given how long ago they were produced,
I wanna watch
and how
them.
obscure they've become. In fact, the Lost Media Wiki article itself doesn't even have any visuals to represent it. This is a pretty rare sight to see on the website, and there aren't a whole lot of articles that sport that missing film reel artwork in the first place. Nickelodeon wouldn't launch their first original animated programs until 1991, so a lot of time existed between when Video Dream Theater was made and when original animation was revisited. I'm sure it would be basically impossible to get a hold of these anywhere outside of Nick's archives, which might not even contain them in the first place. It would be cool to see some early Lost media from the channel to celebrate one of their anniversaries, so
That would
maybe
be
they can dig
cool.
around and re-release them for a future event.
Right?
One of the most fun aspects of looking into Lost media is
that
rediscovering
Shaun
that part of
White?
your childhood that became forgotten about or had lost media connected to it, that you had no idea existed back when you were a kid, or even nowadays for that matter. It's a chance to revisit the past and get new content to something that was probably never really intended to be seen by fans of the series. And this topic relates to the classic book series, Captain Underpants. I don't really follow this series or the community surrounding it, but I know it did have a new movie made for it a while ago, and of course,
What a
I
bro.
remember reading the book.
Growing up, reading the Captain Underpants books, bro. Books were so good. And the movie was cool too.
Books back in elementary school.
Yep.
They were a lot of fun just with how wacky the concept was.
So good back in
and
the
the
days.
Fliporamas made me want to keep reading
Those
just so I
Fliporamas
could
were
make
the
it to the
shit.
next one. But whether you read the book series back in the day or are currently reading it, I'll bet there is one volume of the book you've never read and probably didn't even know existed.
What?
In fact, so few people have ever even seen it, it's almost completely lost, and could stay that way for quite a while longer. This takes us to the early days of the series, 8 years
Captain
before Captain
Underpants
Underpants
Lost
even
Media?
released its first official volume in the late 1990s. The original creation of the character dates back to 1989, when series creator
Damn.
Dave Pilkey wrote the first iteration of what would become Captain Underpants in this 48-page book titled The Really Cool Adventures of Captain Underpants. In more modern times,
It looks
this
so
book is seen
similar
as a
too,
prototype of
except the
sorts,
face.
a self-published novel that was never intended for a wide release. The project was done entirely by Pilkey himself while he was still a student at Kent State University,
That's cool.
and released these books in very limited numbers around local stores in the Kent, Ohio area. They only sold for 10 cents, and all the profits were donated to charity. Now, the majority of this information comes from a Reddit post from 2020 on the Captain Underpants subreddit that, from what I can tell, was the first and only time this novel was even discovered at all, and is where the majority of this information comes from. The Abiding Times, owner of the book, described it as being Xeroxed and hand-stapled, though it looks to be in remarkably good condition over all
For
these
real,
years.
holy.
It was also stated by Abiding Times that their copy is indeed authentic, as they purchased it from one of the bookstores where it was released, back when they themselves were also attending Kent State. Of course, with a discovery as rare and elusive as this, you might be wondering exactly how many copies were made, or who else might have one.
Yep.
While it's not clear how many were made, there is speculation that it couldn't have been a very large amount, due to the fact that it was self-published and handmade.
Yeah.
The number of 25 to 50 is thrown out in the Reddit thread, but this is not confirmed. Now, as for getting your hands on a copy, or possibly sourcing another one, it's not known how many still exist, as no other reports of more resurfacing have ever been seen since this original post. The Lost Media Wiki article that talks about this topic also mentioned interest from other users for Abiding Times to scan and release their copy,
That would
but this
be-
hasn't
yeah.
happened, as according to their Reddit account, they haven't been online since around the time they first made this post. Though if I had to take a guess, I would say even if they were still active, they probably would not release the book's content. Media like this does have some kind of value to the right people, and once scanned, it would lose that value.
Yeah.
While I don't necessarily believe in that philosophy, I can understand why owners wouldn't want to share it. In fact, in one of their replies, Abiding Times even mentioned having listed it on eBay to test the market, but there's no word on if they ended up selling it or if the auction even concluded at all. In fact, there was even more speculation in the Lost Media Wiki forums that this whole topic could be an elaborate hoax, for the fact that Dave Pilkey has never mentioned this book anywhere before, and this is the only photo of it on the internet. Personally, I don't think I agree with that theory, as it seems too real to fake,
I mean, that
and if
looks
the owner never ended up selling
legit.
it, there would be no point in attaching value to it. Though I suppose you could argue that it was never sold because it was a hoax, and only the cover exists, so there wouldn't
Sure.
be any more content in it. I would love to find that listing if it ever existed, as it might give us some more insight into the book, but for now this is all we have. If any of you guys have come across a copy of this in the wild, you hold some lost media and could be the person who shares more of its content online. The next topic I want to talk about in this video is certainly a strange one, not only with how the show looks so brightly colored and odd, but also for the
What is
bizarre
this?
rabbit hole of lost dubs that actually exist from it. In the previous video, we talked about a pretty obscure French cartoon called X Duck X that has a lot of its English dubs still missing, but was strangely dubbed into a variety of different languages, most of which have been found. And this show is kinda like that, for the fact that it got so many language dubs, most of which are still lost, but the English one is the rarest of all. This is a show called Pop Secret that I had never heard about until Stario Pastel
This looks like one of those computer games back in the day turned to a show. It's so creepy.
told me about it. Basically, the plot involves three girls
It's
who
like
are
them
pop
phone
stars by
games.
day and secret agents by night, and they have to balance life between the two. But what it might lack in plot, it makes up for in visuals, because it's one of those cartoons that just looks so creepy,
Sure.
you can't help but watch it. At least from someone that grew up watching Nickelodeon and Cartoon Network. The colors are really bright, which seems to be one of the show's themes, and the animation is sorta like Angela Anaconda cutout style. But where the lost media comes in with this show is the episodes themselves and where exactly they were even available to begin with. According to the dubbing database, this show received 7 different dubs, including the English one, and ran on a variety of different channels in their countries of origin. However, if you look closely at the channel list for the English dub, you'll notice that it says unknown, and Stario Pastels on the forums says they can only find one episode of the English dub online. This allegedly originated from the production company's website, Futuricon, in 2014, without any other kind of episodes posted or release plans stated. I did take a look at their website on the Wayback Machine, but it doesn't really work very well, so I can't confirm that the English episode was actually from 2014, but their current site does have a page where it can be viewed, so it is right there now. There's also a page called Screening Room, which would maybe allow you to view some of the content that was never released from it, if it exists. This relates to a theory I have that maybe one episode was dubbed as a way to test the show out like a pilot, and then without any interested buyers, the project was shelved and no other episodes were ever dubbed in English. Though if that one episode was really made in 2014 like the claims state, that would have been way after the series was originally created in the mid-2000s. Interestingly,
so
I do recognize their minuscule series from when it aired on Disney Channel back in the mid-2000s. But for the most part, a lot of this company's work is pretty unknown to me. It's also a possibility that this could be another instance like the Ocean dub of Dragon Ball Z Kai, where the dub was completed, or at least more than one episode was done, but without anyone wanting to broadcast it, they just shelved the whole thing. Even though this isn't necessarily a show I would be interested in watching, I would love to get answers about its English production, or why only one episode can be found.
Yeah.
Stario Pastels doesn't even know where else you could go to get more episodes. My only suggestion would be to contact people who are at the company.
Like, this is... Like, I don't feel like it'll be as bad in the years going forward, but like for a bunch of these old ones, it's gonna be so hard to get back, because channel unknown, bro. Don't even know what it aired on.
During the time when the show was claimed to be
There's a
dubbed,
bunch of weird,
around
like,
2014.
shows that don't
But who
last.
knows how many of those people are even out there, or if they would remember such a seemingly small project that never went anywhere in English countries. It wouldn't be a rare Nickelodeon lost media video without at least one topic from SpongeBob.
Yeah.
Actually, there are a lot of new lost topics from that series I want to talk about, but we'll save the majority of them for another video. For now, let's discuss a piece of lost media that quite literally fits the definition of rare, because it's so rare that we're not even sure if it exists or not. Now, normally I wouldn't be putting an existence unconfirmed topic in a video like this that covers more traditional lost media, but the response to this post seems to be overwhelmingly in favor that it does exist, and that other people besides OP remember it, which caught me by surprise, as the topic is very strange considering its nature. On the Lost Media Wiki forums, during one of my live streams, a new thread showed up that immediately caught my attention for how ridiculous it sounded, and originally, I clicked it just to see how fake it could be. The thread's title is SpongeBob Intro with Pear and Live Action Band. I was expecting it to be a really long, complicated recollection that only contains vague memories or something that seemed so fake, but to my surprise it was much more defined. The thread goes on to state that in some time between 2006 and 2009, user Jinteg has a very distinct memory of watching Nickelodeon and seeing a strange intro of SpongeBob play. They go on to describe how it started, stating, "It had a strange intro. Instead of Painty the Pirate, the painted pirate who says, 'Are you ready, kids?' there was a painting of a pear without any dialogue. This then cut to a CGI model of SpongeBob's house, with a live-action band superimposed onto it. They were wearing plaid and played a unique version of the theme song.
Huh?
While some doubt is expressed by OP about its legitimacy, mentioning that it could have been something they dreamt up, which is never a good sign in topics like these. The more I looked into the replies and discussed it live on the stream with viewers, the more people seem to recall this, or having seen something similar. Jinteg firstly mentioned that there are old Reddit threads that discuss a similar topic, which led to other people chiming in, trying to better deduce what it could be. These guesses ranged anywhere from something like a special promo or one-off, some kind of parody animation that wasn't actually official, having originated from the internet, or an alternate opening of the show for some kind of event. In my opinion, if this really exists, it seems extremely likely that it would be some kind of one-off or special promo that was aired very few times, since SpongeBob is no stranger to that kind of content having been made. The Summer Splash block, for example, had an entire series of new animations, a large majority of which are still missing. And even something like the Got Milk commercial was very specific and very hard to find, even after having proof that it existed in the first place.
Chocolate mustaches don't last long when you're a sponge.
Ted goes on to say that they've been able to confirm what it's definitely not from, two of which mention it wasn't something created for a ride or theme park, as well as it not being an alternate language dub. According to them, it was aired on regular Nickelodeon, and that's allegedly where they saw it. There's not much else that gets discussed on here, other than more guesses, but even after my doubts surrounding the topic were made clear on that live stream, there still seemed to be a good handful of people in the chat who really recalled it as well. It wasn't collectively debunked as fake, which is what's so surprising to me about this topic and makes me change my tune on it a little bit. We've seen so many SpongeBob topics, that fortune cookie promo that I covered a couple months ago being one of the latest examples, where there's so much doubt surrounding its existence, it feels more fake than it does real. But for some reason, this one feels more real to more people, and that leads us in a more positive direction. My advice, of course, would be something along the lines of looking through recordings from the 2006 to 2009 time period and hoping that something shows up. But I would be surprised to find out this is already on YouTube and is just hiding.
Wait, what is all this?
But I would be
pilot intro? I want to see that.
Be surprised to find out this is already on YouTube.
1934? What?
YouTube and is just hiding. It's probably going to take someone finding a confirmed sighting of it somewhere online and using those dates just to narrow in on when it could have been aired, and better locate a time period from where we can get a possible recording from. And now it's time to talk about a topic that I have mentioned before, but it's gotten so popular within the people who search for 4Kids dubs that it's worth mentioning again, and there's even a little bit of an update on the progress of the search too. This topic is none other than the English dub of F-Zero GP Legend that was produced by 4Kids in the early 2000s.
Let's hear it.
Back when I covered this topic in my original video, there were still a lot of unknown details about the dub and a little misunderstanding that has since been cleared up. Blue Baron has spent a lot of time researching this series, and the majority of this information comes from them, giving us a better idea of what exactly is still missing and how the remaining episodes could be found. F-Zero GP Legend debuted in Japan in October 2003 and ended in September 2004, running for 51 episodes. Soon after the series ended in Japan, it premiered in the US and only ran for 15 episodes, before being pulled from the schedule and never seen on US television again.
Damn.
This abrupt cancellation left fans wondering how many of those original 51 episodes were dubbed, or if there were any more episodes beyond the 15 that were simply left unaired due to it being pulled. A few years ago, I had asked David Wills, who voiced Captain Falcon, about this exactly, to which he replied with something along the lines of the rest of the series was never aired, and at the time, I believe this suggested that every episode of the original 51 count was dubbed in English and just never released.
That's a lot of episodes.
However, Blue Baron has come to some new conclusions, beginning with the actual episode count. Contrary to what I believed David Wills suggested, he didn't actually mean that all 51 episodes were dubbed by 4Kids, and rather when he said the entire series, he meant the entire 4Kids adaptation of the series, which totals 26 episodes, not 51.
That's still a lot.
Blue Baron also informs me that if you convert that to a Japanese episode count, it only reaches up to Japanese episode 35, as the English adaptation skipped some entirely. And this means there is still some content in the Japanese version that was never adapted to English. But the search gets even more interesting from here. Even though we're sure the 4Kids dub only reached 26 episodes, the series was pulled after only having aired 15, leaving the remaining 11 lost and never aired. As for the aired episodes, all of those have been found, but the last part of the series is what we need to find. Like I said, they've never been broadcast or released onto home media, so the question becomes, how exactly is anyone supposed to find those? But we have a lead. According to a comment left on the Lost Media Wiki article for this topic, user EchoFox posted a link to a schedule archive from TVNZ2, showing that the series was aired in New Zealand back in 2007.
Interesting.
This would be the English dub of the series, of which 4Kids is the only one that exists, and based on the air cycle of episodes being 2 each week, it would suggest the series ran for its entire 26 episode run. If anyone from New Zealand remembers watching the series on TV, or happened to record some of the episodes, this might be the only way to archive 16 through 26 and complete the series.
See, like a lot of them seem like it's gonna be impossible to get, but they always find a way.
As there would be no other way to get them with the exception of an official release. But it seems very unlikely an official release would happen, given the current state of the F-Zero franchise, and how the anime itself hasn't been acknowledged in decades. However, if you want a taste of the 4Kids dub of these episodes that are still lost, believe it or not, they have all resurfaced from Hungary, as a Hungarian dub was made based off of the 4Kids adaptation. But of course it's not in English, so we don't have an audio track of that language. We can only see the visuals and how 4Kids changed those. The original English dub remains missing, but with enough searching it's possible these might get found, though it isn't known if reruns aired at all during the New Zealand broadcast, or if their airtime stayed the same throughout the entire series run. Sometimes it seems like when you purposely go out of your way to find weird topics, you never come across them, and it's only when you least expect it when they show up. This one takes us to one of my recent live streams, where the viewers will often request that I go read certain articles on the Lost Media Wiki and discuss them with everyone. Well, this topic that was requested was so strange it left me laughing. I had to research the topic further and spread the word about this entirely lost series from Uruguay, called Don't Bother Me Mosquito in English.
What?
This show is a 2004 CGI series developed by Animalada and
fire.
follows 2 mosquitoes named John and Paul, who constantly target a man named Joe Bigman
This show looks kind of fire.
with their antics, as Joe tries endlessly to squash them once and for all. A total of 26 episodes were released for the series, each one spanning 5 minutes in length. But I'm sure most of you have actually come across this topic before from a completely different place. I had never heard about this existing until my stream informed me of it, but apparently a band named Loco Loco released 2 music videos that featured clips from this series in them, titled Mosquito and It Burns Burns Burns. These have become well-known memes online, and is where the mosquitoes gained their popularity from. However, what you might not have known is
Thank you for bringing some awareness to it, because this show looks kind of fire.
that these music videos contain some of the only footage of the show that's still around today. The Lost Media Wiki article does have an episode chart that can be viewed as a reference for how much of the series is lost. And
Damn.
according to the chart, literally every single episode from the series is missing. In fact, the series is so lost, the latter half of the episode titles aren't even known. But the titles of the known episodes do come from Animalada's official website from the Wayback Machine, so we can confirm those as being official. But what's even more interesting is the offer listed on the top of that page. According to the website, it says that each episode script is fully developed, but available only on request of the full series Bible. I'm sure nobody has ever reached out to this company before to get those scripts, but if they had, we'd at least have some of the content from the episodes,
For
instead
real,
of almost
something.
nothing at all. But what's even more notable here is the existence of that pitch Bible, which would be the earliest interpretation of the series that exists. This has probably never been seen before, and I'm sure no part of it has ever been posted. With a Google search, it looks like Animalada is still around and lists It Burns 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 on their website,
That's
so
cool.
this is the same company. I wonder if they would have any of the actual episodes in an archive, in addition to that pitch Bible, after all these years.
For real, drop 'em.
Additionally, the lore of the show is further added to with one of the only pieces of content we actually have from it, a collection of images that were ripped from a promotional CD. These are
That's so
comedy
cool.
gold, and it makes me think they were intended to be used on greeting cards or to send each other in emails. A lot of them have commonly used sayings on them, but if you look through them all, it illustrates the battle between the mosquitoes and Joe Bigman, along with showing the relationship status of the two mosquitoes themselves. I guess the tall one really dislikes the short one, while the short one simps for the taller one. There's also this hilarious shot of one of them
Whoa.
taking aim at the rear end of a
Chow.
female character, which is just a hilariously awkward piece. The Get Lost one also hits home a little for me, since it feels like the tall mosquito is casting a despicable aura that prevents lost media from being found. Maybe he's the reason why we can't get a copy of Me and My Friends. Overall, this is a really strange show in both visual appearance and rarity, but with the popularity the meme maintained, I wouldn't be surprised if more people end up finding new content from it out of appreciation for the meme. Would it really be a lost media video without a little SpongeBob topic to talk about?
Another one, I love it.
It's the first video of the year, so we have to. And with the more topics I cover from the little yellow sponge, the more it becomes my favorite category in all of lost media to cover. We've only begun 2024, and there's already a huge update with uncensored Sailor Mouth. The possibility that crew members of the show took copies of the recording out of the studio. But we'll save the details for that for another video. For now, let's talk about a topic that you might have seen, and also gets put into the Existence Unconfirmed category as well. I do enjoy a good Existence Unconfirmed topic every now and then, like the Foghorn closing logo mystery, and now we have one about fortune cookies. In another thread on the Lost Media Wiki forums,
Buddy, can you turn the music down, bro? Golly.
a recollection was posted in July of last year that discusses an old scene from SpongeBob that might have been lost, dating back to the mid-2000s. It describes SpongeBob giving Patrick a fortune cookie who eats the entire snack in one bite, including the fortune, which prompts SpongeBob to say, Patrick, you ate the fortune.
I remember this. I could hear his voice. Patrick, you ate the fortune?
Not much else is known about this animation, but 2000's TV Media Fan claimed it looked like Season 1 or early Season 2 animation when it came to visual style, but that they've watched every episode up to 2007, and no such scene
Patrick?
exists in any of them.
You ate
It's
the
also
fortune.
not related to the Layman Fortune episode from many years later, which has led to the belief that it was some kind of commercial, bumper, promo, or anything else that SpongeBob could have appeared in those earlier years. And as we know from all the other Lost SpongeBob topics we've talked about before, that's a lot of other media, so we're not sure exactly right now what it could be. Other users on the forums speculated on what the animation could have actually been, suggesting some other scenes where Patrick eats items, and other episode plots that sound similar to what was being described. Unfortunately, this is where I have a little issue with the topic myself, as it's stated in the very first post that this could have been a Mandela effect or misremembering. Not to mention, if MediaFan was only 4 to 6 when they saw it, that could be a red flag too. In my time researching Lost Media, it's a little more supportive to get that misremembering feeling near the end, after people have already looked around for a bit, and not right at the beginning, which proves in some ways that even OP has doubts this could be real at all. However, I do realize that the zombified bumpers were one of those topics that nobody was quite sure existed until more people remembered them, so you never quite know with searches like this, and since there hasn't been a lot uncovered yet, it could still go either way. A few of the most popular ideas included contacting old crew members like Vincent Waller and asking if he remembered anything like this, or simply finding other scenes from other cartoons that have a similar description. There was one scene from Dexter that fits this quite well, but MediaFan claimed Dexter had long ended by the time the SpongeBob scene was aired.
That's fair.
Near the end of the thread, Crumbelievable left us with an interesting thought to consider, that being the possibility of it having been made for the Chinese New Year, and could explain its overall rarity. I really like this idea, and it feeds into the thought of rare early SpongeBob content that people have come across before, but no one can find.
So fire.
Unfortunately, as of right now, no conclusion has been reached, and the other discussion mostly goes in circles or easily gets debunked. Personally, I have no recollection of a scene like this, and could probably apply it to any number of cartoons I've watched before. As other users have stated, it's a common type of joke to make, but I'm interested in waiting this one out and spreading awareness of it. Maybe unearthing more proof that it does exist, or finding it in some forgotten YouTube upload of commercials. The Got Milk commercial is another example that existed in sort of a similar way before it was found in full. So keep your eyes out for an older, animated SpongeBob fortune cookie short. This next topic is one that I never thought would have existed, though honestly it's one that I'm not sure if we'll ever be able to find. But maybe someday it'll show up, with the new effort and attention that's been put on archiving more content from the history of video game merchandise. While this content is centered around merchandise, the topic itself is a commercial, and stretches my imagination just thinking about all the history that could be uncovered. To give you some background information about where this all stems from, think about how much we know and have found from cartoons, movies, commercials, and the general history of the media thanks to the Lost Media Wiki. Well, the video game merchandise community has kind of existed like that as well, and dates all the way back to the mid-2000s, primarily on a web.
One of the coolest things is like the Lost merchandise. There's so much cool shit.
Website called videogamemm.com. While this website no longer exists, it was here where the internet got its first taste of the history of merchandise, mostly in the form of the old Japanese UFO catcher plushes that very few people had come across or seen at that point in time. It was like sharing a whole different side of Mario with fans outside of Japan, and it's actually where my interest in collecting came from. For a decade after the site's creation, the information and mysteries surrounding these items grew, until eventually it sort of crossed over into the Lost Media community in the mid-2010s. At the time, myself and other prominent YouTubers like PatMac began discussing more of this merchandise and those unsolved mysteries or anomalies with them, reaching a broader desire for people to invest their time and energy in documenting this merchandise. And now in 2024, I feel like we've reached a new era of archival for this kind of content. Just recently, Mario Plush Nation, as well as some other individuals, have been conducting hands-on searches that document product records dating all the way back to 30 years ago.
Damn.
In short, we've uncovered new production photos of plushes arranged in little scenes, which buyers would see when ordering them. We've gotten individual number counts on how many of each plush would ship in bulk orders, which explains why some plushes are so rare while others are more common, and even videos of people winning these plushes from their original release inside of UFO Catcher arcade machines.
That's cool.
It's mind-blowing to see content this extensive related to the plushes, not only for the fact that it was documented and exists in print at all, but also that it was just hiding in places nobody had access to or thought to look for over 30 years. And how this relates to the commercial theme is from one of the most iconic Mario plush sets that has ever existed, the Super Mario 64 set. This one is famous for its inclusion of King Bob and Metal Mario plushes, considered holy grails of Mario plush collecting. But would you be surprised to know that besides a new set sheet having been found showing the plushes, and quantity totals that list how many of each character were shipped, there is also a commercial which advertises these plushes that was made for Japanese TV, and apparently aired according to this announcement in a magazine. To think that these plushes, which collectors have known about for decades, actually started their own commercial is wild to think about, and I had never even thought about the possibility until seeing this confirmed. I wonder how many people even remember watching it for themselves, or why in particular Mario 64 got a commercial, and if any other plush sets did either. This is the first time I'm ever hearing about a commercial advertising video game plushes in Japan. I actually remember the Sonic Adventure plushes did appear in a commercial advertising the game's release in Japan, but the plushes were just used to represent the characters, rather than advertising merchandise itself. And these plushes were prototypes anyway. They didn't look like the same ones that released, so you could never really get the exact same ones they used in the first place. The context for this Mario 64 one seems to be a little different, and I would love to get something like this unearthed to see it for myself. Maybe after more print material is acquired, the next step in the process will be to source TV recordings or more primary sources of the plushes in the claw machines. You know we all need to see a Mario RPG claw machine with Mallow in it. That would be like the next best thing after getting the set sheet that we finally archived. It's a very exciting step forward in the archival of this content, and it's just another branch that grew off of the Lost Media tree, to get more merchandise media and commercial media found. The next topic of the video is one that people have been requesting I talk about for a long time, but just haven't been able to fit into
McDonald's?
anything until today.
Oh
And
my-
actually, it's a great
Bro.
time, but just haven't been able to fit into anything
Bro, that looks so good right now.
until
Oh, I want a chicken sandwich right now.
today. And actually, it's a great place to begin with, considering it will most likely come down to someone uploading it from a home recording. Maybe one of you out there has this and doesn't even know it. As a result of its mysterious disappearance over the years, it's gained quite a lot of attention online and in the Lost Media Wiki forums.
Lost
and it's all about
racist
a
ad?
lost McDonald's commercial. One that caused some controversy, you could say, and when you think about McDonald's commercials, you probably don't believe they could be so rare that they were wiped from existence, but indeed it seems like this one was. The story goes that back in the fall of 2004, McDonald's released a series of commercials that were part of an ad campaign called Defend Your Chicken, which
What?
promoted chicken selects becoming a permanent item on the menu. As the campaign suggests, each commercial depicts someone with this chicken and the lengths they'll go to protect it for how
Okay.
highly regarded the meal is supposed to be. Well, one of the commercials from this promotion was aired on TV and received quite a lot of controversy, and that's what's completely lost.
Why is it controversial?
Going off of claims only, the commercial supposedly depicts an African American woman boarding an airplane with the
Okay.
chicken selects, only to have a flight attendant try to take and discard her food. In that moment, she exclaims, "You better don't," to the attendant, echoing back to the point of the
You better don't. That is so fucked up.
ad campaign. According to recollections online that describe this commercial, it was met with a lot of criticism and controversy for how the language in it was written to be stereotypical and offensive to African Americans.
I mean, yeah, you better
Not
don't.
only that, but it was just a confusing line to begin with.
What's next? A black guy saying I be loving it? Good lord, bro.
As a result, the commercial was believed to have been pulled from TV less than a month after hitting the air and
Cool.
cannot be seen to any extent, which is where the mystery comes in. The intrigue with this commercial does not come from the desire to unearth an offensive McDonald's ad, but rather how it could have stayed completely missing for the past 20 years, despite how well it was remembered. If you search online for mentions of the commercial, you can find all sorts of places where people remember it, from Reddit threads to forums on other websites and even Twitter. It's even pointed out in the Lost Media Wiki forums that the commercial was still being talked about online in the early 2010s,
Damn.
close to a decade after it was pulled from television. There was a lot of searching done through commercial compilations on NBC from around the time, with some other suggestions of looking at channels for older audiences, like Comedy Central. One of the claims from Twitter even said that it aired on BET. This has sort of led to a theory that the commercial was intentionally scrubbed from the internet, and McDonald's did everything they could to erase it from its existence.
I mean, that makes sense.
But there's really no evidence to support that, other than the fact that it's so rare. Though
And
something to
controversial.
consider is another mention that claims an altered version of this commercial was aired too, where the offensive line was replaced with something more generic. But once again, there is no content from it that's resurfaced other than these claims. So the edited version, if
That
it
looks
does
so
exist,
good right now.
seems to be just as rare as the original. A more likely theory as to why the commercial hasn't resurfaced yet is simply the era it originally aired in,
Okay.
2004, and how that was still early on in the time frame of archival, so fewer people
Yeah.
would have recordings from back then. And if the ad did only air for a short period of time before being pulled, or both of them if two different ones were made, then it really wouldn't be any different than trying to find a lost SpongeBob commercial from Nickelodeon that only aired in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
In fact,
it's
if there
rough.
are two commercials with this same premise, it could also suggest that the original one had an even shorter airtime than previously believed, for the fact that it was eventually replaced. The consensus from the searchers in the Lost Media Wiki forums thread is that the ad will most likely only resurface from someone that happened to record it. It'll be interesting to see if this search concludes as a result of awareness about it spreading, or if the recording is actually so rare that nobody ends up having
You
one.
better don't is crazy.
Now, let's talk about a topic that, despite its vagueness, actually caught quite a bit of attention in the Lost Media Wiki forums. I feel like nowadays, we don't see a lot of searches based upon memories that gain traction,
Okay.
with the exception of topics that come from larger brands like SpongeBob. So it was cool to see such an involved hunt for something like this. The title of the thread is called 90s VHS Children's Show Jumper with Frog Puppet Character, and describes
Interesting.
media that OP, Jupiter, had seen decades ago. The story goes that one day, their mom mentioned a show called Jumper that their little cousin was obsessed with in the late 90s, and apparently has no records online. Described as a series similar to Sesame Street or Blue's Clues, Jumper featured a puppet of the titular frog character, Green, with a round yellow belly button, and an accompanying man. There were songs on the show, with one memorable lyric being, "Blue and yellow, green and purple, monsters are just make-believe," as the colored monsters appeared on screen when called. Jupiter states that this media came from 4 to 6 VHS tapes that were acquired from a garage sale back in 1998 in the San Francisco Bay Area.
See, this is where it's crazy, because you could grow up watching a show. Like, there's a few shows that I was watching his videos last night. There was a few shows he brought up. I'm like, bro, like, there's no way this show. Hold on, let me actually pull it up because I actually have it saved. But you could just be growing up watching a show, and you have no idea that show is just it's gonna be gone.
But the tapes are long gone, so they don't have them anymore.
And
this
then they're just
also
gone.
lines up with the belief that the show was also from the 90s itself, but Jupiter claims that it could have been older than that. With some additional details provided from the initial recollection and the consensus from other searchers, it seemed as though this was something that never aired on TV and was low budget. It actually reminded me a lot of Pink Morning Cartoon, and how that one only aired on local channels, and was in fact low budget in appearance. Still, even if Jumper had aired on TV, I wondered how there could have been tapes made in the first place, with it being so obscure. Unless the tapes were intentionally made to be distributed locally or as a straight-to-VHS product. Jupiter claimed the tapes had cover art and photos of the show on them, but wasn't sure if it was American or Canadian in origin. To me, a limited VHS release of a low-budget kids show would have had to have made a crazy journey all the way from Canada to somehow avoid all documentation.
Right?
The only other remnant we have from it is a mock-up that was made to illustrate what the show looked like, and was confirmed to be live action and not animated. Jupiter also insists that they're not confusing it with the usual frog shows you'd think of for kids, like the Muppets or Gullah Gullah Island. It was also stated that there was no merchandise made for the show that they could remember, and it wasn't religious in tone like Pink Morning Cartoon was. So not only does this search come down to finding visuals for this media itself, but it also relates to the fact that if more people came forward with a memory, we could narrow in on more of its details to get a better idea of what we're looking for. There was another user in the Lost Media Wiki Discord server who claimed to remember the show from when they were in school and watched it for educational purposes, but they claim to be from Georgia, which is quite a ways away from California.
Yeah.
However, a theory proposed by user Roby gives us a better idea as to what it could be and is the best guess so far. While searching for Jumper content, Roby came across a YouTube video that matches a lot of the recollection Jupiter has of the show, and believes that this content could be an unrelated production that reuses content seen in Jumper itself.
Okay.
The puppets, in fact, are sourced from Tom Titchener, who has made content with talking frogs before, namely the celebrated jumping frog of Calaveras County. Later on, Tom's puppets were passed on to Brian Hull in 1997 after his death, and this YouTube video specifically is labeled as being an adaptation of an adaptation from Tom. So all things considered, it's possible that Jumper existed in some way in relation to Tom Titchener, and his puppets were used in its production or were adapted into another piece of work for kids. This is only a theory for now, but the timeline and Jumping Frog character certainly add up. If anyone out there is familiar with this kid's show, be sure to let us know about this as well. But until we can get more eyes on this search or any of the searches from this video and uncover more content from them, they'll definitely remain a mystery.
Those are the ones I love to see, just like obscure ones. Like, I hope these get found because it's so cool.
And uncover more content from them, they'll definitely remain a mystery. Who would have thought that we'd actually have pieces of lost media from Brazil in this video?
Go, Kitty.
But I have another topic that I wanted to include for its absurdity. And that old feeling from the early 2000s that every popular series or fad was somehow connected to a larger malicious plan from the corporate overlords. A really common example of this is how Pokemon constantly fought with religion here in the States, but in Brazil there was a similar battle raging over another series like Pokemon where you collect monsters.
Yu-Gi-Oh?
That one being Yu-Gi-Oh!
Yeah!
Just like here in the US,
Fuck
Yu-Gi-Oh!
Pokemon.
Became a huge hit in Brazil when it released in 2003, both the anime and the card game itself. Of course, the cards are mostly what drove the success of the series, because you could buy them, play the game, and trade them with friends. I remember back in elementary school, they
Yup.
put a ban on the game entirely because it was a distraction for kids
Couldn't
who
bring
played
them
it,
cars to school.
and it led to many arguments on the playground from angry kids who felt like they got
We still brought them bitches to school and traded them.
ripped off in trade deals.
Yup.
Anyway, Yu-Gi-Oh! Had a similar battle to Pokemon when it came to religious groups, because of fears over the cards themselves and what they depict. Most notably, claims of there being references to the devil or satanic symbolism.
Well, shit,
And as a
probably.
result of all this hysteria over the cards, a TV program called Good Evening Brazil decided to capitalize on the craze and run a segment that discussed how evil these cards supposedly were. According to the Lost
They
Media
did the same shit for Pokemon, bro. When Pokemon came out, they called it the devil's game. They said it was addicting, it's horrible for kids.
wiki thread about this topic, the host of the broadcast,
I remember that.
Gilberto Barros, went on
Actually, I'm not that old, but I know about it.
to discuss how the card game is connected to Satanism, occultism, and the Yakuza. Additionally, a Reddit thread that recollected the broadcast even mentioned how they showed a clip of Dragon Ball claiming to be from Yu-Gi-Oh! And showed a scene where a villain controlled Gohan
Fucking
and made
idiot.
him attack Goku, of which the news segment claimed the cards led players to attack their parents. This is such a bizarre scare tactic that's classic of that early 2000s era.
Yep, they did
and
the
it's
same
for
shit
that
for
wackiness
Pokemon.
that people want to watch the whole segment. But unfortunately, you can't, and this is where the mystery begins. Apparently, when this broadcast first aired, it spread around in church communities and the internet back in the day, and you can even find videos of kids destroying their cards,
Yep.
a possible side effect that the widespread of the broadcast had in itself. However, nobody can find a copy of that actual broadcast, and nobody in
Excuse
the
me.
community seems to have it either. We know
Weird.
that the program was made by a company called TV Banderitas, also known as Band, who is still around today. However, Good Morning Brazil ended in 2006, so it's not known where exactly the recordings or archives of that show are, and it's been a very long time since the show ended. Though the Lost Media Wiki thread did mention that there have been users who claim to have a copy of the recording, but none have shown up,
Pop it
and I'm
off.
guessing these claims were never proven to be legit either.
Pop it off.
Currently, the only visual we have from the news report is a single screenshot of Gilberto in the center of the frame, with text beneath that reads, "Meet the cards of the devil called Yu-Gi-Oh!" Brazilian Lost Media is definitely growing in popularity compared to years ago, so I would be surprised if this one stays missing for too much longer, especially if more awareness is spread about it.
Oh yeah.
And
it's
now
gonna
the
pop
final
up.
topic of this
Your backyard friends, the backyard against.
video is another one that nobody saw coming, that I haven't even talked about in much depth before,
Talking about the backyard
deepening the
against.
mystery surrounding an already mysterious and tiring search. This one is related to the Backyardigans series, which needs no introduction
Goated.
on this channel,
Yup.
or if you've been following Kids Show
Great
Lost
show.
Media. For many, many years, there have been searches conducted and still going for two of the series' biggest pieces of lost
So
media.
good.
Those being
Is this a live action?
the original live-action
There was a what?
two of the series' biggest pieces of lost media. Those being the original live-action
No
Me and My
way,
Friends pilot,
bro.
which predated the final series by many years, and the actual pilot to the final series, done in CGI a while later.
Okay.
These are the two big Backyardigans topics. Though recently, there has been some debate over how many different iterations of the CGI pilot exist, as some screenshots look a little earlier than others, suggesting there are two different versions. But while doing research into these topics, the Me and My Friends team came across another piece of seemingly lost Backyardigans content that nobody, not even the person that posted it, is
They really had whole suits. They were gonna do a fucking like Barney type deal,
aware of
Yo-Yo Gabba type deal.
where it came from. Back in 2023, Burr and Alex were looking through reels on Vimeo in the hopes of coming across new clips from Me and My Friends that had maybe been posted there by someone who worked on it. Sorta like the Nick Studios Florida 10th anniversary video, which is where the only clip of it comes from. And while they didn't find anything related to Me and My Friends, there instead was a completely different piece of Backyardigans media that was there
What?
and became widely known about for the first time. By complete accident, this short clip of Pablo walking through an environment is sourced from a demo reel posted by Celluloid Studios,
That's so cool.
a company who worked in television and commercial animation,
What?
having created content for dozens of well-known companies. This clip is the only Backyardigans clip that appears in the demo, and doesn't look like anything else we've ever seen from the series.
Right? So
Needless to
weird.
say, the uploader of this reel was contacted and was asked what exactly it's supposed to be, but turns out he didn't know for sure, stating, Celluloid Studios was an animation company that represented many different animation talents. Celluloid ceased operations in 2005. I imagine the clip you mentioned was from an animator who worked there at some time and submitted the clip to executive producers. I was one of several directors at the studio, but rarely had contact with other directors or animators that worked under them. I was never involved with anyone working on Backyardigans.
Rough.
Ever since this response, we had done a little work in trying to find other animators that were at the company in the early 2000s, when the Backyardigans was being worked on at Nick, but we never found anyone who could identify the clip.
I know the creator just passed. Rest in peace to her.
This has left us to guess on what this animation's intended use for, or what it could have been a part of, leading to two theories. The first theory, and the one that seems more plausible, is that it was a test animation done even earlier than the first tests for the Backyardigans CGI pilot that we know today. If you compare Pablo's appearance in this animation to some of his early concept art for the series, they
Yeah, they changed a lot. It's a lot less, like, I don't know. It's a lot more polished.
seem to match exactly, bringing us to the conclusion that they are directly connected. It's also known now that Nick created the pilot in-house with motion capture, so it's possible they had tried giving it to other companies before doing that themselves.
Motion capture is
Now,
interesting.
the second theory that seems less likely is that this is somehow related to Me and My Friends itself, and could have been used in the actual pilot.
That looks...
If you look closely at the background, it appears as if Pablo is located within a park,
Yeah.
which is where the setting of Me and My Friends takes place, meaning its short length could have been used as a bumper or scene transition within the pilot itself. We've never seen any portion of Me and My Friends besides that
so
one short
weird.
clip from the Nick Studios Florida reel, so there could be more original content like this in the pilot that we're not aware of.
It's so cool
and
to
this
see
is our
shit
first
like
look.
that.
But to me, it does seem more likely that it acted as a connection between the concept art of the main series and the CGI pilot, though more questions do need to be answered for sure, like if there are animations of the other characters similar to this. It's such a strange mystery that feels like it shouldn't exist, and gives us yet another piece of lost media to search for, like all of the topics discussed here in another shocking twist. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Be sure to check out some of my other lost media videos.
That was a great video. I'm not gonna lie, a lot of that needs to resurface. A lot of that needs to resurface. These videos are always so good, bro.
I'ma take it slow, wanna keep it short, so I'ma let it blow. Riding around with drugs, I'm an evil soul. My heart's always broke, please just leave me alone. My heart's always broke, please just leave me alone.